I'm super excited for our upcoming speaker, Dr. Dean Ho, a friend of mine in Singapore, and we also went to the same pre-med school. He ended up being a PhD in medicine. Really interesting journey, but I do want to say that this episode is being supported by Global Mortgage Group. We are the world's leader in home equity bridging loans in Singapore, US, London, and Australia, as well as America Mortgages, which is a US direct lender focused on foreign nationals looking to purchase property in the US. So all of our details are below, and I'll also add Dean's details below for our audience to contact if there's any interest for more information.
Well, I'm super excited for this talk with my friend Dean. We actually attend in the same university in the U.S. and we've become friends here. And I find your story and your journey from where you were to where you are now super fascinating. And so we'll unpack some of that. My name is Donald Clip, the host of The Real Asia Show. I don't know if there's another one. And, this is about speaking to interesting people in Asia about their journey to where they are, things that they've learned along the journey, challenges that they foreseen, and a lot of how they view the future and what that means for all of us. So I guess we can start. Dean, you want to introduce yourself and also maybe tell a little bit about your upbringing, and then we can start moving that journey closer to Singapore and unpack that as we go.
Sure, Donald. Thank you for having me. I am Dean Ho. I direct a digital medicine institute at NUS, and we primarily focus on how to use small amounts of data to either help address patients who are ill, more recently trying to keep healthy people healthy, or even make them healthier. And I've been in Singapore now full time for almost 7 years. Time really flies, but I had the privilege to spend multiple summers here as a visiting professor at NUS before that, and really fell in love with this ecosystem and its ability to support innovation and to be super efficient at supporting that innovation, which ultimately leads to time saved, and time saved equals lives saved. And originally born and raised in Los Angeles, and as you mentioned, we're both alums from UCLA, and really, got all my training there, saw a different part of the world. But ultimately right now, it's just super privileged to be here in Singapore, privileged to be a part of NUS and this amazing ecosystem we have here.
Amazing. No, I totally agree. I think the benefits of Singapore is just so good at having the foresight to see the opportunities and having the lack of bureaucracy to actually get things done, right or wrong. But how? So you studied medicine. So you have a PhD in medicine, certain aspects of medicine. Did you always want to be a doctor? When did you know this is what you wanted to do, and go to the school to study that and be an expert in this field?
So, when I first think about my journey into innovation, it started I remember at least a moment in high school where I got to watch a video of a knee replacement surgery. And to put it plainly, it was pretty bloody, and I think a number of my classmates couldn't handle it, but I was totally fascinated. So at that time, I thought, I don't know if I was going to go for medical training or research training, but I thought, I think there's a future for me, something health related. And then eventually I kind of, during the university days, morphed into thinking about law. And then I thought maybe I'll go into law with regards to patents and still be in the healthcare innovation space, but from a legal occupation perspective. But ultimately, when I thought about maybe getting a master's first in biomedical engineering, that's when I realized there's a lot of technology that we need that's not developed yet. And so I thought, maybe I'll do a master's and then go to law school. But then once I ultimately started the master's, I ultimately received a PhD in biomedical engineering. And that's when I realized, if we as engineers take the time to speak to those who we want to collaborate with, and also those we want to serve. And so the collaborators could include clinicians. It can include those who work in design. those who work in behavioral sciences and beyond, and then those we aim to serve, such as patients and their families and caregivers, and everybody in that whole healthcare workflow. We can maybe try to drive change and to improve outcomes for those who need it. And that's when I ultimately really got into healthcare innovation.
Interesting. Yeah, there's so much science out there now. It's quite exciting how science can improve so many facets of our life, from dieting. Now it's obviously longevity, which I hope we'll get into a little bit later. So using technology and innovation in the medical space, you're in the US, and an opportunity came about to move to Singapore with NUS. So you're here now, the ecosystem is amazing. And let's unpack like what you're doing for NUS, and then we can talk about cool and interesting stuff. So,
sure. I think my journey to Singapore first began around, I think, 2012, when one of my very best friends moved out here to join NUS as well. And we've known each other since we were in middle school, and we had all these ideas that we wanted to work on together. And that's when I had the privilege of being hosted by various departments at the university for a visiting professorship over the summer. And I also had been flying back and forth multiple times a year to really build what would become a series of clinical trials, actually using data to treat patients with our tech. And ultimately, I also spent another summer in about 2017. And that's when my kids were a little bit older, and we really just had an amazing time, both from the family's perspective, but also from launching and getting these trials set up with our partners here. And that led to where we are now. I have the honor of directing the Institute for Digital Medicine in the Yang Lin School of Medicine, privilege of leading the N1 Institute for Health at the university level, and then being the head of the Department of Biomedical Engineering. And so with these different portfolios, I have a chance to look at both the education side of the university as well as the research and innovation side. And to sum things up, we do something at these institutes that's quite different. I think when we look at the emerging and promising field of AI for healthcare, a lot of the really important work being done is looking at how to take large amounts of data to train algorithms to help make predictions or to help make decisions. And right now, the field is at the stage of validating these algorithms. Something that I wanted to do, and that I'm so grateful to NUS and Singapore for providing the opportunities towards, was to collect data a little bit differently, to look at each person as an individual and then as a dynamic individual. We change over time. And so instead of taking large amounts of data from the population to train an algorithm to treat the individual, we use only a person's own data to manage and optimize only their own treatment dynamically. And the reason is we all know people are different from each other. And using big data, our colleagues in Singapore and the world are doing amazing things in both therapy and diagnostics. For us, we harness primarily treatment. And by treating each person dynamically, by using only their own data for themselves, we're able to dynamically adjust treatment, things like dose, things like which drug combinations to give patients, to ensure that we evolve the treatment alongside the individual, to make sure that the optimization is sustained. And that's the work that we're doing. And I think we're among the few places out there that are actually treating patients prospectively. Actual treatment under trial taking place, and less of a retrospective analysis. And that's all credit due to the ecosystem we have here in Singapore.
Interesting. Actually, on that note, sometimes you wonder, you have a headache and you go, you buy your Panadol, and it's always like 400 milligrams. I'm like, and it's based on age, right? The age bracket. So if I'm 300 pounds, 100 pounds, I'm like, should the dosage be different? So I've thought about those type of issues. I'm kind of curious. So the dosing is per person, and the data you collect is per individual. How long are you collecting that data where you say, okay, I've got enough, I know the kind of treatment weights for you? Like, is it a week, a month?
It's a great question. It depends on the condition we're trying to treat. For some of the cancers that we're working on with our hospitals, it can take maybe about a week or so to get one data point. And we need about 3 or 4 to kind of really get the ball rolling to start optimizing the treatment. So in some cases, it can take a few weeks. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. And that's why before we launch a trial, we really get to understand the workflow, how long it takes for some of these markers, biomarkers, to change. In some cases, we can modulate dosing daily, because for some of the conditions like transplant, when we're trying to prevent the rejection of an organ, we can actually take data every day, right? So even within a few days, we can start optimizing the treatment. And what's interesting is why we adjust the dosing for each person over time versus, as you mentioned, kind of give everybody a fixed dose, is because we change over time, but also we don't treat disease with a one-size-fits-all strategy. And even with the individual finding the right dose for a person, that dose for the same person can change over time. And there's something interesting. In a conventional sense, the words dose optimization mean different things to different entities. From certain perspectives, dose optimization means escalation. It means finding the highest dose you can give somebody to be tolerable while efficacious. For us, optimization is the best possible patient outcome. And sometimes the doses that we need change over time. And sometimes for people who may be a little bit heavier, it doesn't mean they need more drug. Because when people are given combinations of drugs, the synergies between the drugs change too over time. And that's why we modulate to ensure that, because synergy is dynamic, we're always locking in on the true optimal outcome as we make these adjustments.
I'm just kind of thinking, I guess I could be considered amongst some friends as a futurist, but I'm not looking towards a world where we live in some dystopian, cyber world. But actually having heard you explain tracking markers, it's pretty clear that if we could be in a world where it was easy to do a thumb prick every week, upload it somewhere, and track using technology, things are wrong with you, things whatever, we could eliminate a lot of problems, right? But it's only when you're sick that we go see you, we go see the hospital, and then they start tracking, and then it's almost like too late, right? And then you have to fix the.
Yes, you raise a great point, and that's the reason why we launched at our institute a study called Delta. And that study, because we knew that we change over time, I became my own test subject. And this was approved by our ethics board. And it's not solely a data monitoring or a health tracking exercise. There are interventions as well. I am modulating my fasting durations. I've been known to fast for at least 20 hours a day. Twice a month, I'll do a 48-hour water fast. I've done slightly longer as well. And we try to see how my markers respond to those variable fasting durations as a way to do things like improve metabolic health. I look at sleep and different ways to modulate sleeping patterns to improve deep sleep time as well. And so I think one thing that's amazing about being here in Singapore is we have an amazing clinical community, those who are clinically trained. And I think working in partnership with this ecosystem, we're now starting to see, can we push evidence-based interventions, some of which are lifestyle-based, earlier on in that roadmap to maybe create less patients. If we look at the world at large, the world in general makes it straightforward in some cases for healthy people to become unhealthy. if we think about the availability of processed foods, the economics of how healthier foods can be tougher to access, inequality in healthcare provision generally at the world at large. And so right now we're trying to understand, can we use a little bit of data, not just collecting large amounts, but how we collect the data from each person. Variable intervention, dynamic monitoring to come up with unique twins, digital twins to optimize preventive health as well. And it takes a whole community to do it. Our healthcare providers, all the way to our families, to ourselves, our own behavior, all the way to some cool technology as well.
Yeah, I find actually there is so much, I have a company that I founded, and, we're always trying to remove friction, whether that's whatever that means, whether that's in a sales funnel, the initial sales call, how we follow up, how we close deals. But, I have my knee's been achy, and I've been, I am going to start a path of, GP specialists and scans and maybe surgery, I don't know. But I have to start here and call my insurance provider and say, like, if this happens, how does this work? And I find there's so much inefficiencies and friction. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is that imagine a world where we remove the friction for finding your own biomarkers. Imagine you can just rock up to a clinic here, take a blood test, and then a week later have these biomarkers that you could use as a clinician here, and you'll say, hey, listen, you've come here for the last 6 months. Oh, but these things are acting up. And you cure diseases because you catch it really early. But I think this Singapore, if there's any place that could kind of reduce that friction, it's here. Interesting. Hey, I have a question. You were saying about data. Do you use any of the existing AI platforms, or like whether that's Claude or Llama or Gemini or OpenAI, or is it your own in-house scientists working on the algos?
It's a great question. It's both. I think something that we worked on and really streamlined to be able to be integrated towards practice were some of our platforms such as Curate AI, Identify, and some other platforms where we were able to optimize combinations in some regard, working with our team members and collaborators, all the way to optimizing dose. And one thing about Curate and how it optimizes dose is that the dose doesn't always have to be a drug. The dose can be optimizing the dose of exercise, optimizing the dose of supplements.
And this is for cancer treatment.
And the conditions we treat can be for not just addressing cancer, but could be certainly for infectious diseases, and we have a trial right now on hypertension, but also dosing exercise for healthy people. For example, to optimize VO2 max without overtraining. To optimize distance running without overtraining, because again, we change over time. There is such a thing as overtraining. There is such a thing as overtreatment for dosing. And so Curate was something that we developed so that we could address everything across the health spectrum, not just health care. We can optimize cognitive training with it as well by optimizing the dose or the intensity of some games that we're working on as well. But to make this work, it really takes an ecosystem. And I'll mention that what's really cool about being here in Singapore is that for this to go from being an idea towards building a prototype, towards validating it in trials, to eventually scaling it and achieving adoption and even maybe reimbursement in the future, it takes accessibility of an ecosystem. And when I say accessibility, we need to work with our university stakeholders, clinical collaborators, regulators, policymakers, healthcare economists, behavioral economists, all the way to reimbursement. And Singapore is a place where within the span of a week or two, we can be speaking to most, if not all of these stakeholders and moving together. And the trials that we've successfully run are clear indicators of how we were able to get this done in a short amount of time. And that's one of the key drivers for why I'm here. I always tell people time saved equals lives saved. And time saved equals helping keep more healthy people healthy and creating less patients at an even higher degree. And I think to address all of that, we need all of these disciplines working together, but we need to be able to reach everybody as well. And that's what we have here in Singapore.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some countries out there, not to name any names, that is addressing the unnecessary bureaucracy in many government agencies. Some actually we need, but I think sometimes it's good to just take a step back and say, hey, listen, is this helping or hurting, right? Whether that's in healthcare or Department of Education or tax, whatever it is. But it's, Singapore can do that, right? Because it has the political will. And, actually I used this story when I was in Hong Kong as a banker. I helped build the equity business of a large Chinese bank. And Temasek would come to the board meetings. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool, the big client, big investor. But it was interesting is like when China entered the WTO in 2001, they asked Singapore to be their strategic advisor. Population 3 million, population 1.5 billion. It's like asking Manchester United asking, Orchard Road football team for assistance, right? In terms of, and it just shows you that people respect Singapore's ability to think generationally. Like, what's the outcome in 100 years, not in 2 years, 4 years?
Right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. So interesting. So tell me, so you've been doing all this cool innovation and tech in healthcare, and I don't know if you can say, but are there any things that like big wins where you go, oh my God, this is amazing? And as a side note, just to, maybe we can talk about this in a bit, so Dean, I've known you for a while. I've seen the crazy things that you do to your body and the amazing changes that I can see, like everybody can see. But so talk about one, through your studies and things that you're doing at work, what are some of the findings that are amazing and you're really excited about? And also for yourself, I know you use yourself as a guinea pig quite a bit, and some of the findings you found on yourself.
Yes, I think there are some unifying themes across our clinical trials as well as Delta, the study with me as the test subject. I think one overarching theme is sometimes less is more. And what that means is we've had time and time again cases where for patients that we treat under trial, lower doses in some cases can lead to increased efficacy at the right time. And in other cases, what's important to note is that constantly driving doses higher may be counterproductive to improving outcomes. Our goal is not to low dose everybody. That's not the goal. The goal is to find at any given point in time the right dose for each person. This can be a dose for a patient of medicine. This can be the dose of exercise for a healthy person or a patient at the right time. And so what I find with myself is that with the Delta study, if we look at one of my interventions, it's intermittent fasting. And I will typically eat my meals between 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. daily. It's about a 4-hour window of eating. And I will do longer fasts, but I have found that fasting for too long, which is analogous to giving too high a dose, may be, first of all, not as sustainable. But if it leads to things like muscle loss, it's just something that we don't need to venture towards at the end, which can lead to kind of finding the sweet spot at any given time of how long to fast to make sure certain markers are at peak levels that we want. And even at increased doses of fasting, some of the markers we want to build up can actually drop even further. For example, including if we break down muscle, which we're trying to avoid. I think some of the key learnings I have found are that, first of all, behavior is tough to modulate or to modify. When we talk about preventive or proactive medicine, this shift will rely on a person's behavior more than ever. And to do that, to sustain that, is asking a lot. And so I think we have to find ways to sustain that. However, I will find that when I really started to rethink my sleep, which is actually really quite remarkable, I think the sleep that I log in every day is proof that people can change, people can improve. Something that I never really prioritized before, I'm actually doing pretty well at. But something that really helped solidify Delta as being important for me is that my children, who are 12 and soon to be 11, have started to prioritize their sleep, right? And we're in right now, I think the current young generation is among the worst slept in history. And what we do know is that diseases are creeping up earlier now in young people, and we should do what we can to try and address that. And one way to do it is by things like that are well established, like behavioral modeling. We know that healthier doctors have healthier patients. Healthier parents tend to have healthier children. Healthier leaders in organizations have healthier team members. These are things that have been established before. And looking towards these incentives to drive our own better behaviors, I think are things that we can continue to look at, and especially in our community here, leveraged by a little bit of tech, a little bit of data, I think we can move the needle. And that's what we're working on. And for me, watching my kids try to emulate my sleep is a huge motivator for me to stay on track, because I want them to be healthy. I want them to thrive. And that's more effective than money. We know that previous studies have shown that people can't be paid to be healthier. But if I can see my kids sticking to healthy behaviors because of me, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, interesting. Let me ask you, so I know you do intermittent fasting, and I know you do this to collect data and see how your body reacts. Do you think that this is the best way to live? Or if you weren't collecting data, would you do this diet?
That's a great question. First of all, I don't think everybody should fast.
Right.
I think people who want to fast and who can do so safely should consult a physician to see if it's right for them, and also to start slow, start small. I didn't start at 20-hour fasts or longer. I started even less than 16, which is a popular fasting duration. I started at about 12 hours and then gradually worked my way up. And I have modulated and changed my fasting routine over time. For me, I think it's something that's sustainable. I don't think that, broadly speaking, it's the best way to look at things like health span and longevity for the world at large. And as we've talked about, one size fits all for medicine-based treatment, dosing for pharmacologics, we know we should try to move away from that. Same goes for things like time-restricted eating / fasting / supplementing / what types of exercise we do. But I think it's, if somebody's going to embark on a fasting journey or a supplement journey, that they calibrate and recalibrate, because implicitly, I don't think the word optimum can be characterized by a snapshot. Somebody cannot maintain an optimum fasting regimen by fasting for the same duration every day for the rest of their life. Because by definition of us being dynamic, that optimum changes over time, and we can't know what that optimum is without some calibration and recalibration.
You got to change things up a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious. A lot of stuff that we consume and things in popular culture, we're programmed to think that is the way. You've got the little triangle of food, and you got the eggs here, and you got the meats down here. Or it's like, heck, even like Christmas, programmed to go by the Christmas tree and buy the presents, or Valentine's Day. And maybe diet is, something from 300 years ago. It's like you have to wake up, you have to have your eggs and your oatmeal, and you have to have the salad. But maybe it is, there's a better food schedule that fits more of the mass.
Absolutely. I'm going to add that as we age, and we're aging every second, the definition of an optimum diet probably can change as well. I'll give you an example. I fast, but beyond that, and beyond changing my fasting duration, I'm starting to incorporate more plants into my diet over the week, right? Some days I'll do 1 day that's plant-based. I'll do 2 days, 3 days that's plant-based. And that's just for me, right? Other people have different ways that they want to approach their diet. But my definition of optimum, what is sustainable, what I can adhere to, is changing as I age. And I think that just goes with the theme of the optimum needs to change alongside the individual.
Interesting. Yeah, one thing I stopped doing is, I'm kind of I wouldn't say gadget guy, but maybe I am. But I was on this like drinking hydrogen water, tons of NMN, and like tons of supplements, and I just stopped. Right? I mean, I still drink the hydrogen water every so often, but I stopped the supplements because I actually don't know how it's affecting me. Like, you just go iHerb, you buy your things, you take it, then you end up taking like 50 pills, and I have no idea if this is good for me or not. Until I find like, is taking vitamin C actually good for me? I don't think it actually changes the way I feel. Let's talk about some of the things you worry about. Like, so, what are the pressing, you're in this field, you see where just like business, where the opportunities are, but where things need to get fixed faster than others. Like, what's the biggest, and this could be East versus West. Problems in the East are different from the problems of the West, or what are the problems in the West versus the East? But what are some of the health-related problems that you see that need to be fixed?
Well, I think with regards to health, I think instead of a problem, I view this as an opportunity that's certainly being pursued by many, but is something that is certainly important to continue pursuing, which is in the region here. There's a lot of people in the ASEAN region, right? But the thing is, the healthcare systems are very different across the different segments of this region. And I think something that's important is, there's a lot going on in the world right now, but at the same time, digitalization is increasing. And I think there's a real opportunity here where, regardless of kind of where the priorities of different jurisdictions are, that I think globally being able to help people who are sick or sharing strategies to keep healthy people healthy or making them healthier are areas that I think broadly speaking the world can align on. And with the increase in digital, I think there are opportunities to harness digital medicine for diplomacy. The ability for us to remotely help patients in other parts of the world. And at our institute, we are in the working stages of planning trials where we can remotely help cancer patients in India using our data platforms and with very minimal transfer of sensitive data or even not, right? With all the compliance frameworks, we don't need demographic information to do our optimization work. So de-anonymization is already better protected against in that sense. At the same time, that's for helping cancer patients. We're also launching trials on helping to reduce hypertension, but doing it in a decentralized fashion for participants in India and in other countries in the region as well. I think that if we're going to look at things like health span and longevity, it's important to share these findings with partners so that we can learn together. Because for some of these fields, there is not yet enough evidence to help understand if something's going to work or not. We have to do it together. And digital is one way to drive that, because we can, from our institute, help somebody else across the world, in another country in the region, both. And we can do this at the same time. We can scale this. And I think that's something that's critical, to use what we're learning about digital to keep more healthy people healthy, prevent disease, and help those who are sick already.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think it's an area of democratization that there's no reason why we shouldn't. I have a question, just really for myself, the layman. Let's just hope that we're going to cure cancer one day, right? And hopefully with all this technology and compute power and AI power, it figures it out. How is it cured? Is it there's something you take that eradicates it forever, like polio, or is it something you take that is it something you cure, or is it something you just, as soon as you get it, you treat, it'll never be a problem again? Like what are we trying to, like what's the answer here? Is it a
It's a great question. I think there are different ways to look at it, but being holistic will matter, and I'll get into that. So I think that in certain cancers, how they deem curative is if they find it very early, they can surgically remove it. There might be some follow-up treatment, and then after some continued surveillance, maybe it never reappears again. And in that respect, there are some types of cancers that are there already. There are other types of approaches like immunotherapy, where people's own immune systems are being trained to go after the cancers. And they do this with different medicines, even their own cells that are engineered, for example. There are companies that are developing cancer vaccines that are being validated and studied as well, much like, as you mentioned, like the vaccines as we know them. And I think that it will depend on the type of cancer. Some cancers are not at a stage where they're deemed curative. But at the end of the day, if you look at the themes here, early detection matters. There are many methods being developed to detect cancer early, because the earlier they're detected, the more approaches there are to try to deal with them early and maybe towards being curative. The challenge there is there's a behavioral component. There are countries where screening methods that are extraordinarily effective are already present, but the screening uptake is low. And that's a behavioral component, or it's an access component. So in the end, if we look at cancer as a whole, and we're going to move towards being curative, it's going to be a hybrid of medicines, surgical procedures, early detection, better ways to conduct surveillance on the cancer to make sure it doesn't come back. And to make this all happen, it's not just a technology approach. It is a whole of systems approach with regards to behavior, education, advocacy, access/economics. All of that will have to come into play. And I think it's a substantial challenge, but with the new tech that's coming out, with, I think, being able to better bridge that tech with communities, we'll make important strides. And the final thing I'll mention is there are strategies that are being explored to make kind of cancer a little bit more chronically addressable, right? To be able to continue to provide certain therapies over time, to make adjustments so that it's not immediately terminal. Right? So there are many communities working on this, but to make this work, communities globally have to work together because of the diversity of the populations out there. This has to be a united effort. And now is a more important time than ever before because we have that new tech coming out.
Yeah, it's funny, the inertia of humans. Like I know I have to stretch. I know I have to warm up before playing sports. I never do, and then I get injured. And it's amazing. You can say, as with cancer, like you got to go do these markers, even if they were free. Go to your community clinic, do this test. It's free, and we could see if you have. And I'm sure most people won't, because it's like that friction, and then it's too late.
That's right. And I think that, human behavior is more powerful than the most powerful drugs out there. Because even if you put an amazing pill in front of a person, they don't use it, no effect. Which is why I think that if we think about the new technologies that are emerging, and behavior attempts have been made for generations to try to influence behavior, but it's critical to keep at it. And for me, if I even look at my own motivators, and there are many different motivators for me, right, on why I do stretch every morning, why I work out every single day, why I stick to a clean diet, and why I fast. And for me, it's actually my family and my friends.
Yeah.
For me, what would make me the happiest is if even a small piece of what I'm learning about myself has some positive influence on my friends and my family. And I have a close group of friends here. They are legendary friends that I hang out with. And for me, it's like, if anything I do maybe helps one or some of them adopt something, a healthier behavior for themselves, so that we can keep hanging out 10 years later, 20 years later, playing pickleball or paddle much, longer into our years than we would have had otherwise. It's worth it. And for my kids, if they can remain healthy and thriving longer, right? And my wife as well. I think that's what my driver is. And I've seen positive benefits from my friends. And that's just a huge motivator for me and makes the work that we do worth it.
Yeah, interesting. Actually, I have a friend. Hopefully, I get on this show at some point. But he's, David, if you're out there, he's always been super. He comes from an athletic background, and his family's, represented sports in ASEAN Games. But he's, I'm ice bathing because of him. I've got, eating a certain way, doing certain things. But you do need that, that, I wouldn't say mentor, but community around you where you kind of learn best habits. Maybe there's some people out there learning from something that I'm doing. I don't know what that would be, but interesting. Well, this is, it's, what I kind of, am I talking to you, I'm thinking, it's reassuring, especially being in Singapore, that there are folks like yourselves out there thinking the big problems, trying to fix the big things, right? For all of us, and I think it takes, there's this famous philosopher, I'm sure you may have heard of her. Her name's Margaret Mead. And she had this one famous quote, it's actually on some of my social media posts, which is, never doubt a small group of committed citizens can change the world. It's the only thing that has, right? So it's cool that, there's guys like you trying to think of these real big problems, and using technology, you can actually make it come to fruition faster. And being in Singapore, they can roll it out and make it a real thing better than most countries.
Yeah, and I owe it to my team, the team that I work with, that I have the privilege to work with, those who've supported our work in the community, having an amazing community of friends such as yourself. It really takes a truly aligned, accessible, and agile community to make this work. And I've experienced that from day one upon arriving into Singapore. And every year that's gone by, we've just been able to launch more and more exciting initiatives thanks to the community and the team that we have. So we're super grateful.
Cool. And the last word before we wrap this up, anything you work in your personal life, or anything upcoming that you want to tell the audience about? I'll actually put it in the information area on the YouTube video, but anything?
Yes. I think that our nearest term goal is we're finishing up the Delta study, and we are preparing to report all the findings in the coming months. And it's a lot. It's metabolism, sleep, microbiome, working with an amazing team here and company that's helping us do the analysis there, all the way to us leveraging our digital twin approach. We've used it to help cancer patients. We've used it to help people train better. We're about to develop a platform in our institute to use digital twins to truly optimize athletic performance. It's a human performance initiative.
Wow.
But it's leveraging digital twins. And within the next couple of days, we start taking delivery on some of the equipment and the tech for that. You pair that with our tech that we've developed, we're definitely going to help healthy people become even healthier.
Wow, amazing. Well, keep me posted, and I can tell the community. But thanks for that. That was an amazing discussion. Learned quite a bit. And thanks for that catch up again. Yeah, for sure. Well, that's it for this episode of The Real Asia Show. We'll wind it up and look forward to the next episode. Bye-bye.